This episode of Brains Trust is a little different from the other episodes because we had to record an industry leader who is based in London. We always tend to believe that the world of business is driven only by commercial interest. However, building and sustaining large enterprises which are significant, sustainable, and therefore successful, you need a collective set of shared values anchored in deep philosophical foundation. My guest today is the Chief Operating Officer of Unilever out of London, a Unilever lifer having joined as a management trainee, and he was elected to lead Hindustan Lever before assuming his current role as the COO of Unilever. What strikes me about Nitin are his values and his deep humility. During my conversations with Nitin, I discovered that these values are not kind of prescriptive. These are not virtues, and he doesn't preach them. These are choices that he and his team have made for the greater good. And I'd like Nitin to share this journey as to why he believes these values are essential and how these deliver great business results which are sustainable. Nitin, welcome to Brains Trust. I'd like to start by asking you, what keeps exciting you to go to work every morning, having been in Unilever for the past 30 plus years?
Listen, 30 years is a long time, but it has never felt like 30 years. It hasn't felt like 30 years because there's something about this company which resonates with me. I joined this company only because it was such an iconic and admired high-performing company, but I've stayed with it because something about its values, its people, its culture resonates with me. A deep belief in wanting to do well by doing good. And many companies talk about it. I somehow felt that this company believed in it. And more recently, as we have been more explicit in what we want to be famous for, what do we want to stand for, etc., it has only strengthened my belief and conviction in wanting to spend time here because the job is still undone. There is so much more that we need to do, and I'd love to be a part of a company which is attempting to demonstrate that a sustainable company, a company which puts the interest of society, the planet at large, at the heart of what it does, can also be a high-performing company, that there is no trade-off between the two, that we are once and for all able to kill this debate whether a sustainable company can be a high-performing company. And like I said, that debate has yet to be won, and I'd love to be a part of a company which is which aspires to do that.
So my question here is that you work for a company which is truly global in that you source from around the world, you have plantation businesses in many countries, you manufacture in many, many countries, and you meet consumer requirements in all these countries, which is really very diverse. So from where you are sitting, how do you see this diversity?
I think it is true that we are a global company. Our products are now sold in over 190 countries. We have operations in most of them. And the only reason Unilever has succeeded for so long across the world is because we've thought of ourselves as a multi-local multinational, which means that as we operate in these countries, we'd like our people there to be connected with the culture, the ethos, the society in which it operates, because in the end, consumers are local. We have to understand their needs and in a strange sort of way, turn on its head something that we've lived with. And most of us grew up talking about multinationals, which think global, act local was a mantra that we had heard. In Unilever, we'd like it to be the opposite. We want to think local, but act global. And what that really means is thinking local means putting the needs and interest of whoever you are that you're serving at that moment. But the solution in terms of how you serve that person's needs need not come from the limited resources of that local operations. That's about acting global. We can bring to bear the science, the technology, the know-how, the learning, the best practices from anywhere in the world to solve for that local need. So our mantra of success is actually the opposite of what you talk about: think local, act global. So that's how we've operated, and that's how we'd like to do. And in that context, I think, yes, we've been diverse. The fact that we've been in so many countries over these years has allowed us and has needed of us to be diverse. But I still feel that diversity in the 20th century and diversity in the 21st century have very, very different requirements. And there's a lot that we needed to do and we've embarked on, and a lot more that we need to do going forward. In fact, there were three things that we would as a team like to be famous for. One I'd mentioned earlier: we'd like to be famous for being the company that kills this debate once and for all, whether a sustainable company can be a high-performing company. Now, in order to do that, we'd also like to be famous for two other things. One is having a portfolio of brands which are the most purposeful brands, because we touch people in their lives through our brands. And the third thing we'd like to be famous for is we'd like to be a beacon of diversity and inclusion. So it gives you a sense of how important we think diversity and inclusion is to some of the other goals that we see for ourselves going forward.
So when you say this, from where you are sitting with your entire board and your senior management team, and you reflect on two things: one is purpose, and the second is the set of core beliefs which a company of this scale and complexity has to live by, where everyone sort of walks the talk. So would you like to articulate as to what you think are the core beliefs and purposes that Unilever believes in as we speak?
I think Unilever's purpose, as we've called it, is to make sustainable living commonplace. Okay. And we can do it through our brands which touch over 2 billion people every single day. The more purpose-led we make our brands, and our aspiration is to see how through our brands we can make it easy for people to live sustainable lives. That's our purpose. But it's like the Holy Grail. It will take a long time for us to be on this journey, but that's where we are. There are three beliefs which underpin this. The first belief that we've got is brands with purpose will grow. The second belief is that people with purpose will thrive. And the third belief that we've got is that companies with purpose will last. As you can see, purpose is at the heart of all of this. And the reason we have some of these beliefs is because as we look around the world, we see more and more people who are looking for brands that go beyond the functional category attributes. They're looking for brands to stand for something, stand for a cause, propagate an issue. And we believe that brands which are able to resonate with the issues facing society will be the brands that people will prefer. Now, this doesn't give any brand the license to not deliver and not offer high quality products at the right price. But increasingly, that will be insufficient. People will want to associate with brands that stand for causes that are dear to them. So also with people, we increasingly find that people, especially the youngsters, no longer want to work for an organization which is largely it's almost mercenary, where the only thing that drives them is maximizing shareholder interest and value. We find more and more people wanting to work for organizations with a heart, with a soul, which want to make a difference. And as individuals, we see more meaning in our roles and lives when there is purpose in it. That's why our second belief, that people with purpose will thrive. And last but not the least, it is our deep conviction that society will simply not allow companies which don't overtly put societal interest at their heart. They simply won't have the license to survive, and therefore only purposeful companies will last.
So there's a conversation you and I had a couple of weeks back, and you said something which kind of stayed with me, which is that these higher order values that you're talking about oftentimes gives the impression that you're talking about an NGO. But here you're talking about a corporation, and you had some very interesting thoughts as to why these are necessary conditions and will actually deliver stellar business results. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know how exactly to answer this, but I'll offer two or three thoughts. I feel on occasions, this whole mantra that we've been taught in business schools, that the sole purpose of business is shareholder wealth maximization, has probably got something wrong. And I'll try and explain why. As I reflect back on business, which started maybe hundreds, thousands of years ago, it first started with some individual finding a way to serve somebody's needs in a village, needs in a small community. And when that individual served that need well, society rewarded that individual. And the reward was what we call profit today. Now, over a period of time, society's needs have changed, individual needs have changed. But I believe that the purpose for business or any commercial enterprise hasn't changed. It is to serve societal needs to the best of your ability. And when you do that well, you get rewarded, and that's profit. So the way I think about it is the purpose is of serving societal needs, and the outcome of running a great business is the profits that you actually deliver through the business. That's a point of view and a belief that we've got. And I think over a period of time in business schools and the way we've taught, we've probably got confused between what the purpose is and what the outcome is. That's, I think, message number one, I'd leave. The second is when I see what's happening in the world around us, when I think because of certain actions that business has taken or has not taken, there is a disconnect between how society sees business today. Many businesses and many business leaders are seen by society as being self-serving. That there is a fracture, there's a disconnect between the societal contract that existed at a point in time and how business is operating today. And that's why trust in business in general is not as high as it should be. And consequently, you see many of these movements around which frankly is something that we need to be concerned about. And therefore, it is my belief that the time will come when, because of a combination of, multiple reasons, it could be individuals who become aware and choose to buy brands and from companies which are more purposeful and which are overtly socially responsible. It could be because of civil society action. It could be because of government regulation. It could be because of a combination of all of this. But I believe a time will come when society will simply not allow any company to follow any strategy which is not overtly socially responsible. Now, this doesn't mean business has to operate like an NGO. The way I think about it, there are many ways to do good to society. Some ways are the ways of what NGOs do. There are many ways by which you can run deliver value to shareholders, but you could be mercenary about it. We as Unilever wish to straddle these two, which means we want to operate in the intersection set of these two, which means finding those strategies which will be good for society and good for business. And frankly, that intersection set exists today. That intersection set is not large, and therefore it is tough to find strategies which meet both, but it exists. But the reason why we must strive hard to find a way to operate in that intersection set is because we believe that these mutually exclusive circles of doing well to society, doing well for society, and doing well in a business, which were wholly independent and are coming closer together. And today there is a small intersection, and we feel in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I don't know how long it would be, they will fully overlap. And when they overlap, you simply don't have a choice. That's why it's so important to build the muscle now. And that's why I'm so excited at what this company is trying to do.
So that brings me to an issue which societies around the world are confronted with, which is diversity. We have for a very long time felt that diversity is not unidimensional. And this takes me back to a conversation we have had. And I found it most interesting because you have completely widened the canvas of diversity to a level which virtually includes everything. During my conversations with you, you completely changed the paradigm, and I found it most interesting and very impressive that someone like you and your colleagues are looking at it the way you are. Give me a perspective on the way you see diversity and inclusion in today's context.
I'd start off with what you talked about, which is gender. And I wouldn't assume that the job has been done. There was a recent study which came out on the International Day for Women, when PwC came out with a study which showed that at the pace at which society is addressing gender-related issues at employment, it will take 117 more years, 117 more years for us to get to what I would consider a pretty basic level of outcome, which is gender pay parity. 117 more years for this world to get to gender pay parity at the pace at which we are making progress. So let's not underestimate the importance of that. It is tragic that half the world, at a time when we talk about war for talent, at a time when we talk about maximizing human capital, half the world's population doesn't get equal opportunity in many ways. And when we started off on our journey, we weren't there as well. When we put the spotlight on us, gender balance in our management team wasn't where it should have been. But we did a few things, starting with a public commitment, saying that we will get to 50-50 across management. And I've reflected long. It took us almost 10 years between the time we called out our intent till we got to this outcome. And it took 10 years and it has many lessons in all of this. And the first lesson is that it required real belief, real commitment, and real conviction that it is not just a social and a moral issue, but there is a business case towards driving this diversity. Because in the absence of that, you could never stay the course for a period of 10 years. That was the first thing. The second thing I learned in this period is that once you accept this, it is about interrogating the issue, the real challenges, finding solutions, policies, practices, which had to change. And then staying the course for this period to get to the outcomes that we want. And in all of this, the recognition that there was no shortcut to a structural way by which you could get to 50-50. Because if you tried to do that quickly, without realizing that there were some systemic things that you need to work through, I think we would do disservice to women, to this movement, and you would set yourself back a long way. So it took us time, but pleased to say we are 50-50 last year, that it's 50-50 across large parts of our business. Our executive, our independent board is 50-50. Our top leadership team is 35-65. And why do I say that? I say that because while we made progress, we are not 50, and we are 50-50 at management. We are not 50-50 at all levels of management. So there are still pockets of influence where we need to keep pushing the bar. But I think we realized over the last few years that this is an important dimension and probably the first dimension that society must undertake, but we cannot stop at that. I think there are many different aspects. So we started thinking in terms of disability, and we made a public commitment saying, can we have 5% of our workforce which is differently abled? And once again, for many people, the question is, oh, why are we doing all of this? What's the business case around bringing in people with disabilities? This is just another form of CSR. And I'm 100% convinced that it's not. Because there's nothing wrong in doing that, but we are a business. We have to find a way to operate in this intersection set. And I'll give you an example to make the point as to how the notion of ability and disability is so contextual. And this example goes back to an entrepreneur I'd met many, many years ago who was running a foundry. And this person who was running a foundry discovered that all his workers, that every hour he had to give people a 5 or 10 minute break because the decibel level in that foundry was too high. Everyone worked with earplugs. The people didn't like those working conditions. If somebody paid them a few rupees more, they changed their job, so attrition was very high. Till there was a breakthrough thought that this person had. What if everyone in the foundry was deaf? So he employed 100% of his people who were deaf people. And magic happened. Magic happened because they never needed the rest period every hour. They operated with high levels of productivity through the 8 hours of the day. Nobody else was willing to give them a job. So A, they were beholden to the employer because you had been given a job. Attrition was close to zero. Skill development was very high because time on job was so much higher. Productivity went up dramatically. Now, why do I narrate this story? I narrate this story because we have a very unidimensional approach of what is ability and what is disability. You and I, who are of normal, or so-called, the term normal is also very odd, who can hear, we are disabled in that context. A deaf person is appropriately abled. And the purpose of this story was to show that you can bring in people and find a way to improve competitive advantage, to improve productivity, and not see this as just a social or a moral cause as a result of which you're doing this. So that was the second example. So we started off now with disability and seeing how we can bring more disabled people in and bring in a different dimension and different skill set in the organization. And the third, of course, we continue to work with different forms of sexual orientation, LGBTQI, etc. But more recently, in the last 12 months, ever since the events of the pandemic, which started as a health issue, became an economic issue, soon became a societal challenge with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. And we suddenly started realizing that issues like race, ethnicity, which were below the surface, were suddenly being brought to the surface and were becoming big issues in society, where there was a large section of society that somehow felt excluded, that somehow felt that society and the way business society was operating didn't give them a fair chance. They were raising their voice. And therefore, we are now working hard to see how can we increase how can our employees more closely represent the demographic of the society in which we operate. We don't have all the answers. I don't know how we are going to solve for this, but again, we see the critical importance of solving for it, both because it's a social need at this moment, but also because how can we as a business, a consumer goods business which wishes to serve all sections of society, how can we be best placed to do that without having as good an understanding from within of what those issues and challenges are?
So here I'd like to go back to one thing which you mentioned, which is that over a period of time, you expect that society and consumers will demand these responses from corporations. In the last few years, you have been leading businesses. Do you find that a change is happening because of social media? Do you have some insights that people are now demanding these things of corporations? And what would be your ideas around this?
Let's take the most recent example. I think till 5 years ago, brands could often come and talk about what they stand for, feel good things, but not often backed by substance. Yeah, this was what I would call greenwashing, where they would want to indicate and suggest that they have larger societal needs at their heart, but frankly did nothing about it. Yeah. In today's world of transparency, where people have a voice, people have a choice, very little of what a company does or a brand does can stay hidden, can stay transparent. And therefore, more and more people are demanding of companies, demanding of brands to demonstrate whether they are living by what they are talking about. So when after George Floyd in the US, for example, when this Black Lives Matter issue became significant, many brands jumped on the bandwagon and talked about their support for this cause. Guess what happened? In social media, there were many people who called these brands out. They said, listen, We are no longer going to be satisfied with what you say. Demonstrate that you believe in it. So people were asked to come clean with. Tell us what your representation within the company is. Tell us how many people of color do you actually have. Tell us how many black people are there in positions of authority. Tell us what your board positions are. And if you don't do that, there were movements which were going on to say, if this is not done in a certain period of time, we could boycott these brands. And that's how movements started. This is one example of how people are becoming more conscious. And with social media, people have a voice, and of course they've always had a choice in terms of how they choose. Just giving you one example. I think there have been other examples as well, not just amongst the public at large, but I'll also tell you employees within the organization are also holding companies to account. In the past, we always thought of activist movements which are becoming activist shareholders. But there is activism going on in terms of society where people are pushing you to doing things. There is activism in some form happening within the company where enlightened people ask you a question. Hey, you talk about this. How come this policy and practice of yours is inconsistent with what you said? And in a way, we welcome that. We welcome that. And as we talk about our desire to be the most sustainable company, and we talk about all of this, it has endeared us to many youngsters. The number of young people who follow us on LinkedIn and want to therefore join us has never been higher. Many of these people join our company. They are idealistic. They want to make a difference and often push us to say, why can't we go faster? Why can't we do more? We are not walking the talk. So there is pressure building up from all sides, and in a way it's good. It will keep everyone honest.
Nitin, now let's look into future. I mean, from where you are, you have been building a pipeline of talent. There are young women and men around the world who are in schools and colleges who are looking to start their career in a few years. And there's been a period of great change in the last maybe 5-10 years. The world is changing dramatically because of a whole host of interventions. What do you think is the future of work and workplace? How do you see that?
Wow, that's a big question. And there's only one thing I know, everything else I don't know. One thing I know is that the future of work and workplace won't be the same as it has been in the past. In fact, it won't even be how it has been a year ago. Yeah.
Okay.
A year ago, if someone had said to me that it is possible to run a company where everyone is sitting at home and you sit in front of the computer and the next 1 year you would be running the business in this manner, I would have said, you must be nuts. Yeah. And I would have dismissed the notion that it is possible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big thought here. And the big thought for me is that I would have used arguments like, I've been around for 30 years. I know what it takes to run a business. This is not possible. I wouldn't even have entertained the possibility that it can be done. Yeah. It required a crisis to prove it can be done. Yeah. And that tells me that I had, and probably several of us have, some self-limiting beliefs which hold us back, which prevent us from exploring possibilities. And sometimes you need a crisis which forces you to try something different. And I ask myself, what are the beliefs I might be having, which I shouldn't wait for the next crisis to probably challenge. But be that as it may, I think the future of, because of what we've gone through now, I don't think the future of the workplace will be the same as it has been before. I don't think, maybe I'm being too bold, but I don't think anyone will, or most people will revert to a 5-day in the office model ever again. My gut tells me that most people will be in office 2 to 3 days a week.
Okay.
Insignificant fraction 5 days a week. And also I feel a very small fraction, or probably no one, or very small, never going to office. And I feel that the 2 or 3 days is the sort of balance that we need to manage the building of social capital, the collaboration, the interaction, and yet providing everyone the flexibility, the personal time, space, etc. And we know productivity can be managed and productivity can be tracked for those who worry about that. So I think the future of the workplace has undergone a change. And I think office will be used for 2 or 3 days, but for doing very different things. Very few people should be going into office and doing their email. That's a terrible use of that space. Now, the future of work has many different dimensions. I think because of how technology is evolving, how automation has developed, how robotics is going on, I think there are many, many studies which seem to indicate that more than half the jobs and roles which are being performed the way we are performing them today will not exist in the next 5 years, certainly won't exist in the same manner or form. Now, that's a scary thought. That's a scary thought for people. It's easier for someone like me who is closer to the end of his career than at the beginning of your career. But imagine if you were at the beginning of your career and you find that the skills that you've grown up with, which your education has taught you, in 5-7 years, they become irrelevant, they become redundant because many of those machines can handle a lot better than you can. That's a scary thought. And therefore, in the future of work, we have to do two things. We have to become clearer and clearer in terms of what are the things that a machine will always do better than a human being? And what are some of the things that a human being will always do better than a machine? Always, I don't know, but at least for the foreseeable future, will do better. And I think being able to recraft roles with this in mind, that's point number one. And point number two, I think the pressing need for all organizations and for every individual is to inculcate a culture of continuous learning, reskilling, and upskilling. And if we can help do that, then I think we will be able to deal with the social issues of people finding themselves insecure, skills not relevant, etc. We'll be able to find ways to remain relevant. Because, while it's scary to say that many jobs will be taken away by robots and automation and technology, the good news also is that studies show that the total number of jobs will not reduce. There will be different jobs. Yeah. And that's the area that we all need to upskill ourselves in. So that's one thought. But along with all of this, I think people are also thinking a little differently. And it is not inconceivable that people may make different choices between work and life balance going forward. Yeah. It is not inconceivable that in some parts of the world, people may choose different models. Somebody may want to work 2 days of the week. Somebody may want to work 4 days of the week. Somebody may want to work 6 days of the week. And all of this may change depending on the life stage that you are in. So we are at this moment experimenting with and would like to develop a suite of different employment options, giving ultimate flexibility for an individual to operate with any model that you feel is right for you. Because if we can do that, we will never lose out on any talent that we wish to have, and we can get them on their terms. So that's really work which is going on. And actually, you might find it interesting. We are experimenting with a bold experiment in some ways. We are experimenting in New Zealand at this moment of what might be a 4-day work week. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when we announced it, and you can imagine how much discussion happened before we decided to try it out. And even when we were trying it out in New Zealand, you can imagine the concerns in other parts of the organization. What does that mean? And why do we work 5 days? And why can someone be allowed to work 4 days, etc., etc. But somewhere we felt that, who knows, 10 years from now, 4-day week might be more of a norm than we imagine. And for everyone who thinks that's impossible, I would just remind people that not too long ago, a 6-day work week was the norm. When I joined, started work, many companies worked 6 days a week.
Correct.
Today, 5 days is probably the norm in most companies. In fact, if you go back a couple of 100 years ago, just after the Industrial Revolution, a 7-day work week was the norm. From a 7-day work week, we've come down to a 6-day work week, to a 5-day work week. Now, what's so magical about 5, which wasn't about 6 and won't be about 4? So that's just contextual. So it's not impossible that a combination of automation, a combination of people's choices that they wish to make, that we could get to a 4-day work week into the future, or we might not. We don't know. And that's why we are experimenting with all of this.
So that brings me to the last few overs of the conversation, which is on leadership. What are your thoughts on leadership when you're building an organization for tomorrow with all that you have said? Because if that is to be sustained, and the people who have the ability to, to be free thinkers, who can evaluate things critically and take it to the next level, how does Unilever think about its leadership pipeline and the kind of qualities you're looking for in future leaders?
In Unilever, we have what we call standards of leadership, and we split them into 2: the inner game and the outer game.
Okay.
The outer game is everything that we know of, which is business acumen, the ability to address issues, result orientation, high performance mind, all of the stuff, the hard stuff. Leading people, talent catalog, all of that. The inner game is about yourself, your mindset, your philosophy, your service orientation, your agility, your desire to constantly upskill, reskill, etc. It is if the outer game is what you do, the inner game is about you and how you show up as a leader. And I think into the future, the inner game will be the differentiator. There will be many, many people who will have the skills and qualities required in what we describe the outer game. And I think leaders of tomorrow will, if that's our point of view for the future, which is that society is unlikely to give any business the opportunity to operate if it is not if its actions are not socially responsible, if all of these pressures, climate change, inequality that we talk about, then leaders of tomorrow will have to be leaders who find a way to, who have purpose at their heart, who have deep conviction and belief in this point of view. Because in the absence of deep belief and conviction in this, you're unlikely to be able to solve for this. That's point number 1. Point number 2, I think leaders of tomorrow will have to recognize that the challenges that we are solving for are so large that no one corporation will be able to solve for it. And therefore, collaborating, networking, and partnering almost has to be their way of operating. I think too much in the past has been about individualism. I think that will have to change. And I think this partnerships will have to extend beyond the boundaries of our organization. Third, I think leaders of tomorrow will have a different trait. I think there was a period in the 20, 30, 40 years ago when there was a profile of a very macho alpha male CEO. I think that will change. Yeah. In fact, in today's term, even talking about alpha and male as characteristics of leadership is wholly wrong. So leaders of tomorrow will have to be will have to be more inclusive, will have to be more humble, will have to be more collaborative, and probably not let ego be the driver of many things that we do. And listen, I'm no authority in terms of what's going to happen, but probably a very different profile of leadership is going to be required into the future.
Nitin, one last question, which is that, and I can speak for myself, that when you are working in a large corporation for 30 to 40 years, you kind of get into this bubble and you become very good at what you're doing within that bubble. And, you might get less and less connected to the real world outside, which kind of makes you unfamiliar with what is happening on the ground. So do you think that because of the structure of corporations, people get disconnected from the real world? What are your thoughts on that?
It's an absolutely valid comment. All I would say is the more disconnected you get from society at large, the more irrelevant you are likely to become. The only way business will remain relevant is by being aware of the changing societal needs and finding a way to address them, be it in terms of portfolio, in terms of capabilities, in terms of everything that it does. Reasons companies stop succeeding is because they continue to offer products and services which no longer address the changing aspirations of society. That's the only reason society rejects them. In fact, I say in very simple terms, when a business is growing, when your market share is rising, there are many reasons why you should be looking at that. Partly because it grows your business, but partly a growing market share is a sign of continuing relevance of that business in society. When people buy more of your products, it means you play a bigger role in their lives. When people start buying less and less of your products, it simply means you've got disconnected with what people really want, and you're becoming irrelevant. And we know that irrelevance is a slow but a sure sign of demise over a period of time. So companies have to work hard. But by the way, having said all of that, everything that you said about a company is true. You can get into a bubble, you can get very internal, most of your conversations are with yourself, and you can get locked into your past instead of looking at the future. All of this are real. Every company faces that risk, including Unilever, and we have to ward against that risk. And what do? Just make sure that we try and drive external orientation, immersion with consumers, force people to get real and understand the lived experiences of different sections of society, because it's through that you become sensitive, and through that you're able to tailor your offerings. But it's a continuous challenge that companies have to deal with.
Nitin, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on Brain's Trust, and I'm very grateful to you. Thanks.